Hi everyone, and welcome to the Nervous System, Neurons, and Neurotransmission. This is mods 5.1 to 5.3. Here are your learning objectives, and here is your vocab. Pause where you need to. So, what is a neuron? So, a neuron is what makes up our brain stem, and our nervous system. We have over 100 billion neurons in our brain. They are specialized and unique nerve cells that send messages throughout the body. Every behavior, every thought, every emotion, every sensation that we have is a result of these neurons. If we didn't have neurons, we wouldn't be doing any of those things. So you do need to know the parts of a neuron. So if you look at this image here, where the message comes in to the neuron is called the dendrite, and those are those branch-like things that are on the left-hand side here. So they receive the incoming message and they send the electrical impulse through to the soma and then the axon. The soma holds the cell is the cell body, and it holds the nucleus. So if that dies, the neuron dies. The axon is this longer part here. In your brain, they're very tiny, generally speaking, and in the leg, they are very long. So they range in size, the axons, and that sends this electrical impulse that carries the message through to the axon terminals. So the axon terminals are where the message releases from that neuron, goes through what we call the synaptic gap or the synapse, and that is this tiny, tiny space between two neurons where a neurotransmitter is sent from one neuron to the next. Now, in that axon, when that message is going through, there is something that wraps around the axon, and it's a fatty tissue called the myelin sheath. And that fatty tissue actually helps speed up the electric impulse and sends the message faster. So those are the parts you need to know. Now, how does it send this message? So there's something called the all or none law. So we said that neurons work on an electrical impulse. So they need to receive a message that meets a certain threshold. You don't need to know what that threshold is. You just need to know that they have to meet that threshold. If that threshold is met, the neuron fires. If it is not met, even if it's really close, it doesn't fire a little bit, it just doesn't fire. If it goes over the threshold a tiny bit, it fires. If it goes over the threshold a whole bunch, it still fires the same. So all or none means it either fires at the same rate that it would, or it doesn't fire. So the action potential is that neural impulse, that's actually the electrical charge that runs through the neuron that sends the message down through the axon and out through the axon terminals. And what message are they sending? That message is a neurotransmitter. So neurotransmitters are chemical messages that they travel through that synaptic gap onto the next neuron, and each neurotransmitter does a certain function for us. And we're going to go into neurotransmitters in the next video. So one way to remember this is thinking of a toilet. So a neuron either fires or doesn't fire. A toilet either flushes or doesn't flush. So if you push the toilet lever hard enough, it will fire. But if you push it just a little bit, it won't fire, right? So it's all or nothing. You can't make a toilet flush harder or just a little bit. It either fires and flushes out or it does not fire. So how does the nervous system process sensory information? So for this, we're going to remember SIM, sensory interneurons and motor neurons. So sensory nerves are in the peripheral nervous system. So our hands, our legs, everything in the peripheral that isn't up here. they're going to carry information towards the spinal cord and towards the brain. So they're sending a message to the brain. Let's say it is you're listening to music. So in that case, it's coming through your ear. Those sensory nerves are sending the message to your interneurons. Now, your interneurons are in your spinal cord. And these are kind of like middle management, if you think of it like that. There are billions of these, and they are processing all sorts of sensations, because we have way more sensations than we actually are aware of or process. For example, right now you might not be processing the temperature in your room, or if it's an extreme temperature, that's what you're focusing on. Maybe you're not really focusing on how your butt feels in the chair that you're sitting in right now, but if you really focus in on it, you might squirm a little and want to move, right? So the interneurons are dealing with that stuff all the time. Just because you're not focusing on it doesn't mean that it's not something your brain is processing. Because, right, if something's wrong, then it's going to bring it to your brain's attention. So middle management gets this information, decides what's important, and sends it to the brain. If the brain says, kick the soccer ball, then it's going to send that message out towards your foot to your motor nerves in your foot. And those motor nerves will carry out the actual muscle movement of kicking the soccer ball. Now, it could be a situation where you have a simple reflex occurring. For example, your hand touching something hot. When your hand touches something hot, it goes from the sensory nerves in your hand to the interneurons. And those middle management interneurons, they get that message and they say, oh, we need to handle this right away. There's no time to send it to the brain. And so immediately it sends out the message to pull your hand back. That's why sometimes you might even have a reaction like that, a reflex, where you pull your hand back before your brain becomes consciously aware of what happened. You have that moment where your hand jumps back and then you feel the pain. That's because the way you feel pain is in your brain, and you moved your hand because of your spinal cord before your brain even got the message. So takeaways. Remember, there are over 100 billion neurons that make up everything we do, we think, we feel, we sense, and we're not aware of most of what's going on there. Neurons either fire or do not fire, so think of the toilet flushing for the all or none law. Remember SIM, sensory, interneuron, and motor. And then remember that no two neurons ever touch. They're super, super close together, but they do not touch. They send messages through the synaptic gap. All right, so that wraps up mods 5.1 to 5.3, and I will see you in class. Thanks.